you're not identified with it. You're the space in which it occurs, not the planner. This takes practice. At first, you'll remember to do this once every few hours, then a few times an hour. Eventually it becomes semi-continuous. Not that you're always in monad recognition, but that you're returning to it frequently enough that it becomes the baseline you deviate from, rather than the special state you occasionally access. The second integration challenge is emotional intensity. When strong emotion arises, anger, fear, grief, desire, it's extremely difficult to maintain monadal recognition because emotion is designed to hijack attention. The biological system needs you to identify with fear, so you'll flee danger, identify with anger, so you'll fight threats, identify with desire, so you'll seek resources. Evolution programmed emotion to be compelling, specifically so you can step back and observe it neutrally. The practice isn't suppressing emotion. Suppression strengthens the autonomic system, because it reinforces the belief that you need to control your experience, that some states are acceptable and others aren't. The practice is recognizing that even the most intense emotion is content arising in awareness. The awareness knowing anger is not angry. The awareness knowing fear is not afraid. The awareness knowing desire is not desiring. But this recognition is almost impossible to access in the moment of emotional intensity. You haven't already established it during neutral states. You can't suddenly remember you're the monad when rage is coursing through your system if you haven't already practiced recognizing that you're the awareness-knowing calm. This is why daily maintenance matters. You're establishing a baseline of monad recognition that becomes accessible even when conditions are challenging. Simeon, the new theologian, described this in the 11th century. At first, the remembrance of God comes and goes. You remember, then you forget. You remember, then you forget. But with practice, the remembering becomes more stable than the forgetting. And eventually, the forgetting becomes the deviation, and the remembering becomes your ground. Not that you're always conscious of being the monad, but that when you do check, it's there. Like breathing, you don't think about each breath, but breathing continues. Monad recognition becomes like that. The third integration challenge is social interaction. When you're alone in formal practice, maintaining monad recognition is relatively straightforward. But the moment you enter social context, the conditioning to perform identity activates intensely. You have roles, parent, employee, friend, spouse. You have reputation to maintain, expectations to meet, social scripts to follow. All of that requires identifying as a separate self who has agency, who makes choices, who can be evaluated and judged. The practice isn't abandoning social roles. That would just create different problems. Unemployment, relationship collapse, social isolation. The practice is recognizing that the self performing those roles is a construct, useful for navigating material reality, but not ultimately what you are. You are the awareness knowing the construct, not the construct itself. Meister Eckhart got in trouble with the church for teaching this too explicitly. He said, "I go about my duties. I preach, I teach, I counsel, but I am not the one doing these things." The monad works through this particular form, through this biological, psychological structure called Eckhart, but I am not Eckhart. I am the awareness knowing Eckhart's experience. The church accused him of claiming to be God, but he wasn't. He was saying that identification with the personal self is optional. You can perform the functions of personhood without believing you are the person. Like an actor who plays a role without believing they are the character. In practice, this means you're in conversation. Someone asks you a question. Thoughts arise that formulate a response. Words emerge. The other person responds to what you said. And throughout this entire exchange, you can notice awareness is knowing this conversation. It's knowing the thoughts forming, the words being spoken, the reaction arising. You're not trying to control the conversation from a detached position. The conversation happens naturally, but you're recognizing that you are the awareness in which the conversation occurs, not the conversational participant. This is subtle and takes substantial practice to stabilize. At first, Trying to maintain the nod recognition during social interaction makes you seem distant or unresponsive because part of your attention is directed inward. Over time, the recognition becomes background rather than foreground. You're not actively remembering I am the monoder during conversation. You're simply not identified with being a separate self who's conversing. And paradoxically, this often makes interaction more fluid because you're not defending a self-image, not managing how you're perceived, not trying to control outcomes. The fourth integration challenge is dealing with suffering. This is where monad recognition gets tested most intensely, because the promise of spiritual practice is often presented as freedom from suffering. But monad recognition doesn't eliminate suffering. It shifts your relationship to it. The biological organism still experiences pain. If you cut your hand, nerves still fire, pain signals still register. The psychological structure still experiences distress when things don't go as desired.
What's up, guys? Being a content creator means every day is a busy day. And on your days, it's honestly extra hard to stay productive. One thing that helps me focus is making sure I'm comfortable, especially with what I use during my period. I've been using Medes Long, their fastest absorbing pad that's now actually longer. It is a hypoallergenic top sheet that's